What's up guys, Rex here. In today's video, I'll be talking about secondaries as they relate to the medical school application cycle. I'll be going over just the basics of what secondaries are. I'll be giving you my top tips to write the best secondaries you can, and then I'll be sharing some of my secondaries that I use to get interviews to schools like Duke and Johns Hopkins. Real quick, a little bit about me. I am currently a first-year medical student at Duke University, and I am just immensely grateful to be at the school I'm at, and I'm so thankful for all of the success that went beyond what I ever thought possible I had in my application cycle. And so I want to share all of what I learned with you so that you can have as much success or more than me. Also, I'll be using the chapters feature, so go ahead and hop around to whatever is the most useful for you. If this is your first time here, consider subscribing and checking out some of my other videos. I'll have linked down below to a playlist of all kinds of videos that I've put out about the medical school application cycle. So the basics. Medical school secondaries are essentially an additional part of your application that is school specific. So after you fill out your primary application, which is your actual like AMCAS application that has your personal statement and all of your activities, descriptions, stuff like that, once the schools get that, typically they will send you your secondary. Some schools send the secondaries to anybody who applies. Some schools do have like a cutoff, which is usually just like an automated MCAT cutoff or GPA cutoff, something like that. In my experience, pretty much every school gave me a secondary even before they got my MCAT score. So they were just automated, gave it to everyone. What they comprise of is typically like 2 to 4 essays that are usually pretty short in length. Some schools will be a lot longer and have like 6 secondaries. Some schools will have none whatsoever. And some schools like Carl, Illinois are way out there and their secondary is very non-traditional where you have to complete like artifacts and do actually a recorded video interview. But for the most part, think of secondaries as additional essays you have to write that are specific to each school. And of course, there is always a dollar tag associated with it, where you also will have to pay between $70 and $130, somewhere in that range on average, per school to complete the secondary. Don't you love that? Now, when should you be writing these? I would generally say to pre-write them if you have the time. I don't think that's absolutely necessary, but I do recommend it. Now, you can check out links that have basically all of the previous year's secondaries for each school. And schools generally don't change their secondaries up much year to year. So I'll just have a link down below to one of the websites that has all of the secondary prompts so you can pre-write them if you are so inclined. This doesn't mean you have to do this months in advance. Often this is a good thing to be doing after you submit your primary application and you have that like month window, give or take, for AMCAS to actually approve it. You can take that time to try and start pre-writing secondaries. I don't think you have to live and die by some hard like 2-week turnaround from when you get a secondary, but the earlier the better. That is advantageous to you to submit them. So try to pre-write them if you can. If you can't, do make a good effort to have a quick turnaround on your secondaries. If you want to know more specifics on medical school timelines, check out one of my videos. I'll have it linked down in the description below. So now just some broad sweeping general advice that I would recommend to use when you're writing your secondaries. Tip number 1 is to build off of your primary application. You want to be making a story with your primary application, and you want a continuation of that story to take place in the secondaries. And now this isn't something that's going to be easy to do with every single school if they ask about something totally unrelated to anything else, but you should have sort of built up who you are as a person in your primary application and continue to show that same person in your secondary. The biggest thing to avoid is having secondaries that seem like they're written by a totally different person than your entire primary application. It should have the same voice and character, and it should be like, oh yeah, this makes sense that someone who wrote this primary application would be writing a secondary application like that I'm reading now. So they should be built off each other, continue the story. Tip number 2 is to use anecdotes. Generally, the secondary prompts are going to be something that will give room to have an anecdote, and that is a great way to make sure you are always showing and not telling. Classic writing advice. Tip number 3, that being said, be authentic. And so don't force some example if it doesn't necessarily fit. There are times where it might be really hard to think of a good anecdote. And so if you don't have a good one to say, don't make it up. Don't try and stretch some story to make it seem like it's the greatest struggle ever for an adversity essay, or try to like overplay the diversity you bring, or overplay some accomplishment for talking about a success or talking about a leadership experience. Be authentic, be genuine about it, be realistic about it. You want to put your best foot forward, but don't try and like morph things so that it seems like you're writing what you're supposed to be writing. be authentic first and foremost. Number 4 is make your answers actually unique to that school, especially for a why this school. You might have some similar things, but broadly speaking, you want those to be unique and you want them to be specific. Number 5, a lot of prompts will be multi-part questions. Just make sure you actually answer all of the different parts. That might be hard to do with word or character constraints, but actually answer all parts of the question. Number 6 is do reuse stories. So I do say to have them unique to each school, but the actual anecdotes you use, you can start reusing them. And so it should get faster and faster to write secondaries as you start writing more and more of them, because there's only so many ways to ask about adversity, so many ways to ask about a leadership experience, only so many ways to ask about diversity. You shouldn't totally copy paste, but you should be able to copy and paste and then edit a little bit so it's a little bit more specific to that school, but you should be able to reuse a good amount of material to make the process go a little bit faster. Number 7 is that don't think you have to have every story and response be like super medically related, especially if it would be doing some sort of significant stretch. It should be about who you are. The secondaries can be a time to really show off your uniqueness as a person and as a human. It doesn't necessarily have to be like, oh, check out this other activity I did. Check out this other great experience I have to prove that I'm so great as a doctor and going to be a great doctor. This is more about being who you are. That being said, you do want to be putting forward some part of yourself that is explaining why you want to be a doctor or explaining why you think you'll be a good doctor, but that doesn't have to be through a medical example. The examples you use can be totally unrelated to medicine if they directly answer the prompt better than any anecdote you would have related to medicine. Number 8 is don't be afraid to leave the "is there anything else?" question blank. I think most people probably should be using this, that you have something to say that hasn't been covered in the rest of your application. The school gives you an opportunity to talk about that. You should use it. Or if you have some optional essay about diversity and you have something unique about you that you would bring to the school, do use that. That being said, if you can't think of something, it might be better for you to leave it blank. So I'm just saying that in some cases, you can leave it blank. That's what I did for all of my schools. All right, so now my secondaries. Oh, these are bad memories of having to write these. So I wrote 49 essays, I think, give or take, hard to keep track. I applied to 15 schools, so that give or take about a little over 3 essays per school on average for the schools I applied to. So maybe use that as a general metric. If you're going to apply to 20 schools, expect to write about 60 essays. Of course, these get faster and faster because you can start reusing anecdotes, but still, 49 essays, it was a lot. And so I'm going to share a couple of my examples from schools that I actually got interviews to, so hopefully they're decent. If they're terrible, let me know in the comments down below. I'd really love to know what people generally think. Are these good ones? Are they bad ones? Feel free to rank them best to worst in the comments. I'd love to hear. So first up, a secondary I wrote for Johnny Hopkins. I got an interview there. So this is a question talking about, is there like a specific specialty that you are interested in? So are there any areas of medicine that are of particular interest to you? If so, please comment. The area of medicine that is most interesting to me is orthopedic surgery. I was initially fascinated by it because of the impact it has had on my life from 2 surgeries on my left arm and a surgery on each foot. I have experienced firsthand what it is like to lose mobility in a way that would be permanent just a few centuries ago to having it fully restored with an operation. From a physician's perspective, I am drawn to how tactile orthopedic surgery is. I love the idea of having the satisfaction of using my hands in a macroscopic way to improve the lives of my patients. The second area of medicine that I am interested in is care for the elderly. I believe that they are often forgotten by society and left to grow old alone in their homes, hospitals, or nursing facilities. Additionally, elderly people often face limited access to healthcare or lack of healthcare that has a unique understanding of the needs and challenges at their current stage of life. I want to use orthopedic surgery to serve this population in a manner that uniquely considers the challenges of their stage of life. Specifically, I want to use orthopedic surgery to help elderly patients by restoring and preserving their mobility so that they can continue living the lifestyle they desire. When elderly people lose their mobility, this often sends ripples into every aspect of their lives, decreasing their independence, forcing them to relocate, and isolating them from friends and family. I want to work to address these problems by moving beyond only reactive surgical interventions and encouraging more preventative procedures and lifestyle changes in patients. Additionally, I want to help increase access to medical care by proactively bringing care to patients. Lack of care and lack of mobility are often intertwined, compounding problems. As a patient's mobility decreases, they can less easily leave their homes to reach medical care. For this reason, one of my goals is to provide wellness and mobility checkups in patients' homes to ensure they are living and can continue to live the lifestyle they desire as they age. A final area of medicine that is of particular interest to me is innovation. I believe that medicine must be constantly evolving to meet new patient needs, to address current needs better, and to develop treatments for previously untreatable conditions. I hope to continue using my biomedical engineering education throughout my career. While I first and foremost want to work personally with patients, I also want to use my experience caring for patients to drive innovation. I want to collaborate with others and work with companies to help develop new procedures and devices which can improve the care of countless more patients than I could serve on my own. So that is Johnny Hopkins. I thought that was a good one. That was an example of where I didn't use many anecdotes because I don't actually have any shadowing experience previously in orthopedic surgery. So I wasn't going to try and put that together in some way. I didn't tell a touching story about my own experience or my grandparents' experience or anything like that related to orthopedic surgery. So that's something you don't have to do, but I thought I did a good job of explaining my interest and showing how there's a variety of reasons that I have that interest and that I have thought thoroughly about this before actually answering the question. All right, this next one is from Duke, and so this is an example of sort of a bit of an indirect diversity question, just asking tell me about yourself. And so it doesn't have to be super medical related, it can just be very personal and just about you. So describe the community in which you were nurtured. What core values did you receive, and how will these translate into the contributions you hope to make in medicine? What improvements do you think might make the community better? I am immensely thankful for the community I was nurtured in. Growing up, I lived in a safe, cul-de-sac neighborhood where everyone knew each other. It was, in many ways, the archetypal suburban community. There were dogs barking, neighbors grilling, and children playing in the street almost every night. During the summer, my neighborhood would come together to organize a block party with a live band and a fire truck present to create a fire hydrant sprinkler for the kids. Another key aspect of my personal community was my extended family. My father alone was one of 62 grandchildren on his father's side. When adding together the rest of my father's family with that of my mother's, I grew up with hundreds of relatives, which I had to inevitably refer to generically as cousins, because I could not keep track of anyone's exact lineage. This massive family helped make my larger community feel small and close-knit, because everywhere I went, I would run into people who recognized my last name because they knew a cousin of mine. This community first and foremost instilled in me the value of feeling interconnected to people around me. I could always find similarities and connections between everyone in my community. I hope this value will translate into my career in medicine in two ways. First, I want to build a community with my coworkers of all different disciplines so that we better work together to provide the best care to our patients through a team atmosphere. Secondly, I hope this value helps me better connect to my patients and build positive relationships with them. Another value that was always present in my community was the value of hard work. This was especially true among the members of my grandparents' generation who grew up on farms in North Dakota without running water or electricity. One of my grandmother's favorite mottos was, "Good things will cometh to thee who waiteth, as long as thee who waiteth worketh their asseth off whilst they waiteth." This value will inevitably be challenged at many points in my career. While I am excited and know of all the fulfillment that will come from my career, I acknowledge that being a doctor will be difficult at times. I realize that the work of a physician is hard intellectually, physically, and emotionally. However, I believe that often the best measure of a job worth doing is that it is hard. While I often jokingly refer to my community as practically perfect in every way, I know this is not the case. My community's biggest flaw that I wish I could improve is its almost total lack of diversity. I only truly realized this once I moved to college in North Carolina and reflected on how both my community and family are almost entirely white. I now understand how this greatly limited the different viewpoints I was exposed to and the personal growth that can happen within my community. So that was something where I didn't talk too much about medicine. I did answer the questions, but I didn't give this, let me just talk about medicine in my community. I just talked about myself. Nothing too special there. I did tie in a lot about diversity at the end there because I know I am writing for Duke, and that's something they very much value. And so that's a part of myself that I wanted to make sure I put forward. I was being authentic in that, but that was intentional authenticity and directed authenticity. All right, now let's take another look at an example from Duke. This is more about leadership. And this is another time where I'm giving an example, sort of going against some of my advice of not using an anecdote. This is something where I probably would recommend to most people to use an anecdote for an essay like this, but I couldn't think of a good one, so it's fine if you can speak intelligently without anecdotes. Leadership, teamwork, and communication operate synergistically. What do you value most as a leader and member of a team? What attributes do you possess as a leader, and how will you apply them every day? The attribute I value most as both a leader and member of a team is consistency. I believe that it is vital for the success of a group or organization for leaders to remain consistent in all aspects of their leadership role. They first must have consistency between what they say and their own actions. In order to lead others, leaders must first be able to lead themselves. Without consistency, it is impossible for a leader to lead by example and serve as a role model that people want to follow. Furthermore, it is vital for leaders to be consistent in how they treat all team members that they lead. I especially value this because I firmly believe in fairness and the equal treatment of all people. Additionally, both leaders and team members who are consistent are also dependable. It is difficult for a team to work together and function well if trust cannot form among members of the team because people cannot be depended on. Consistency is also a core value to who I am as a leader and as a person. I strive to be consistent every day and in all aspects of my life. Consistency has been a central part of any successes I have achieved either academically or athletically. I also strive to have consistency in my interactions with other people. I want to always treat each person I meet with the same respect they are due as people. Additionally, I strive to be consistent in all of the relationships I currently have with other people so that I do not let any other life events affect how I treat them at any time. Even in my views and beliefs, I actively strive to maintain consistency because I believe that it takes true self-understanding of values to have consistency in all of your beliefs. Another value that is at the core of who I am as a leader that I apply every day is initiative. I believe in taking action and am never afraid if I'm the first person to do so. This helps me step up into leadership positions and take action as a leader. I value initiative as a leader because I believe that it is the responsibility of the leader to start action and inspire team members to do so as well. I apply this in my daily life by taking initiative to learn topics outside of the classroom, in my training in wrestling, and in fostering relationships with my residents as a resident advisor. I also take initiative by seeking out challenges and activities. Finally, I take initiative when I see injustice. I am unafraid to intervene in uncomfortable situations when I am standing up for others. The ability to stand up for what is right is perhaps the most important way in which I try to apply initiative in my everyday life. Okay, so I guess maybe I did use a little bit of examples, but not a real anecdote at the end there. Next up, an example of why this school, and this is specifically me applying to UNC, which is where I went to undergrad. So you might be able to think of this as something that might be helpful to you when you are applying to the school you currently attend to undergrad, if that's something you're doing. What motivates you to apply to UNC School of Medicine? Over the past 3 years, UNC has truly become my home. Something I have always valued is building a sense of community with where I am. That is something I have tried to do with my relationships to the Carolina community, the UNC Newman Catholic Student Center Parish, my classmates, Carolina Housing, and UNC Athletics. I have come to love these communities and am not ready to leave them. Additionally, as a UNC undergrad, I have already gotten to experience a part of the wonderful caliber of professors and classmates I can expect to have at UNC Medical School. During the time I have spent in and around the UNC hospitals, I have only met outstanding doctors and nurses that I would love to work alongside someday. For these reasons, UNC School of Medicine is the most obvious medical school I can see myself thriving at. So pretty short, sweet and to the point, nothing too special there. Real quick, 2 from Penn State. First one is why Penn State? Explain why you decided to apply to the Penn State College of Medicine. I am applying to the Penn State College of Medicine because of its unique accelerated MD pathway in orthopedics. This would be the ideal medical school experience for me because I am confident in my desire of becoming an orthopedic surgeon. I am so excited about this goal that I want to achieve it as soon as possible. Additionally, I especially value mentorship, which I believe would allow me to thrive in the accelerated pathway. So I think that's an interesting example of where some medical schools have unique programs to them that maybe you have to get accepted into after the fact. And that can be a very valid reason to apply there. And that was the only reason I saw myself going to Penn State was if I got accepted into this accelerated 3-year pathway where I got automatic acceptance into the orthopedic surgery residency program. I actually was accepted into that program. I ended up declining it, but let me know down below if you want me to talk more about my experience applying to that program and why I came to the decision to decline automatic acceptance into orthopedic surgery residency in order to attend Duke University. So now here's also an example about advocacy, and that's a very common prompt you'll see talking about advocacy. Write a short statement describing how you envision using your medical education to advance care for underrepresented or marginalized populations. the marginalized population I am most passionate about serving are the elderly. I believe that they are often forgotten by society and left to grow old alone in their homes, hospitals, or nursing facilities. Additionally, elderly patients often face limited access to healthcare or lack of healthcare that has a unique understanding of the needs and challenges at their current stage of life. Such challenges include that of maintaining mobility and the struggles that come with decreased mobility. These are the challenges I hope to most advance the care of as an orthopedic surgeon. When elderly patients lose their mobility, this often sends ripples into every aspect of their life. It can decrease their independence, force them to leave their home, and isolate them from their friends and family. I want to work to address these problems by moving beyond only reactive surgical interventions and encouraging more preventative procedures and lifestyle changes in patients. Additionally, I want to help increase access to medical care by proactively bringing care to patients. Lack of care and lack of mobility are often intertwined, compounding problems. As a patient's mobility decreases, they can less easily leave their homes to reach medical care. For this reason, one of my goals is to provide wellness and mobility checkups in patients' homes to ensure they are living and can continue to live the lifestyle they desire as they age. Now, those of you that are paying attention, that is very much partially copy and pasted from my What Specialty Are You Interested essay from Johns Hopkins. So that is an example of where you can copy and paste, fine tune it for it, but you can start really reusing a lot of what you wrote, use those main ideas, use those anecdotes, use those themes to help make your secondary writing process a little bit more efficient and less painful. All right, last up is my Ivy League acceptance, Dartmouth University. So this is an example of taking a question that you probably could answer in a medical way, but I didn't have a great example. So I took something totally out of left field that was just telling about me as a person. Please share something about yourself that is not addressed elsewhere in your application that you feel might be helpful to our admissions committee. Something that I believe tells a lot about who I am as a person is how I am teaching myself to play piano. I am in no way musically gifted. In fact, I am well known among my friends for my poor hearing verging on tone deafness. However, this has not stopped me from teaching myself piano because I love doing so. It allows me to develop myself in an area of my life where I have immense room for growth. Any area with room for growth is always a challenge that excites me. I realize that I will never be great at piano, but I believe there is nothing wrong with embracing aspects of life that you love that are not particular strengths. I play piano for my own personal growth and not to ever compete with anyone else's abilities. If anything, as I learn more about piano and music, I only gain a deeper respect and admiration for everyone who is musically gifted and able to masterfully play an instrument. All right, so that's just a quick sample of some of the secondary essays I wrote that got me way more success than I ever imagined in my medical school application cycle. If you think it would be helpful to make a part 2 to this video where I cover more examples of secondary essays I wrote, I have a lot more that I could share. Let me know down below. Also down below, share with me any questions, comments, or concerns. I'll read and respond to every single comment. If you want to catch more of these videos, make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell. Check out the playlist on the right where I go over more videos related to the medical school application cycle. Like if you like the video, dislike the video if you dislike the video. And until next time, don't be ordinary, go be great.